meeting. Happy New Year to everybody. And I just want to remind everyone we are recording this meeting because it's made available for members of the public to be able to access afterwards, and indeed anyone who wasn't available to attend. So just to be aware of that. And particularly warm welcome to Councillor Lawal, who is, I think, attending your first meeting, King. Is that right?
It is indeed, yes.
Indeed,
my first meeting, yes.
Great. And you are our partner governor for Northamptonshire. So yes. Welcome, and good to have you here. I don't think there's anyone else I particularly need to signal a welcome to, unless Tracy or Richard tell me otherwise. But I'm sure they will shortly give us an update on membership matters anyway. Really I'll just move on to the range of items that we've got in the introductory section, standing items. So first of all, any declarations of interest for items on the agenda? Obviously your register of interests is available for as paper A, so it was only if there was anything specific in relation to the agenda itself. I don't see any hands, so I will take it that there are none to declare. So we have paper B, which is the minutes of the previous meeting. Can I just check with everybody that they're happy that the minutes are an accurate record of our meeting that took place now back in November? Seems like an awful long time ago now that Christmas has been and gone. But is everyone happy that the minutes are an accurate representation of the meeting? I'll take it that the answer is yes, unless I hear otherwise. Okay, so we move on then to the action log and matters arising. Tracy has indicated to me there are no outstanding actions on the action log. There was one action that we were due to take about inviting James Mullins to this meeting, I believe, and that it has been done, and we're going to be covering that topic on the agenda today. We will see James at that point. He may well already be here with us, but in the sea of faces, I can't quite tell. But I look forward to welcoming him. So, are there any matters arising apart from what's recorded on the action log that anyone wanted to highlight at this stage? No? Okay, well, excellent. So we can crack on with the main business of the council then. So session 1 is dealing with a range of council matters. There's quite a lot of papers associated with this, but I think various colleagues from our corporate governance function will take the opportunity to provide some updates. So first and foremost, we have the Director of Corporate Governance report. As you all know, Richard Smith is undertaking that role in an interim capacity following Fiona's departure. So welcome, Richard, and handing over to you then to present the report.
Thanks very much, Krishni. Good afternoon, everybody. Albeit it seems a little bit late in January to be saying this, but Happy New Year as it's our first meeting. So there are a number of points in the Director of Corporate Governance report. I won't go through the entire detail of the report, but we'll draw out a few points that I wanted to highlight in particular. So as Krishni alluded to, we've had a few changes in terms of the membership of the Council of Governors since the last meeting. We just wanted to make people aware of. So Claire O'Keefe, who'd been our representative for Northamptonshire Youth Offending Services, stepped down due to personal commitments, and later on we will consider the position as part of the future council agenda item. We've noted in here that we're at the moment in contact with a number of people that we haven't seen regularly at meetings to offer our support to them to attend our future Council of Governors meetings. So in addition to the points in the paper, I also wanted to report that Chris Davison, who's our current lead governor and public governor for Kettering and Corby, has signalled his intention to step down as a governor and as lead governor during the upcoming elections process. I'm sure all council members would agree that Chris has made a fantastic contribution to the council, both in his current role as lead governor and prior to that as a public governor over several years. So clearly Chris signalling his intention to leave is a blow, but having spoken with Chris, it's really clear that he's going to remain involved in our work in the sense that he's working very closely with a number of voluntary sector organisations that are key partners for NHFT into the future. I'm also very grateful for Chris in giving some notice so that we've got the opportunity to ensure a really smooth transition and handover. And on a personal note, I've really enjoyed working with Chris. So I don't know, Chris, whether you wanted to comment at this point.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you very much, Richard. Can you hear me, everyone? Is that okay? Thank you. Yeah, no, this wasn't an easy decision for me. I did explain in the letter that was sent out this morning that when I was approached to become a trustee at Kettering Mind last year, it was not only to help them with a Mind Quality Mark accreditation process, which is not dissimilar to a CQC visit or an Ofsted visit. There was also in mind some succession planning, with the potential for me to take on a more senior leadership role within the Board of Trustees. And my work with Action for Happiness Northamptonshire is also developing. We're part of the Prevention Concordat. We're also going to be part of the Mental Health Northampton Collaboration. And I just felt there was coming a time when I just could not do justice to my governor role as I would like. As Richard has said, I do want to be flexible about timings and transition arrangements, bearing in mind the comprehensive round of elections due to be held this spring, the fact that we don't have a deputy lead governor. You know, I've indicated my willingness to stay on until such time as that period comes to an end, but also to offer some, if you like, stability, leadership, continuity for governors in the short term, as we, between us, bring a number of key pieces of work to fruition. Look, I haven't got everything right. I've tried my best to represent the people of Kettering and Corby. I've tried to support governors, particularly in my role as lead governor. Thank you to every governor who stood and stands and contributes in whatever way, shape or form, and for your interest in the work of the Trust. And that for me was one of the difficult decisions, is that I care. I do. I care about NHFT. I care about its staff. I care about the patients it treats and also the community it serves. So I'm not going straight away. It's not my last meeting. With Krishni's and Richard's agreement, I hope to be here in March, which would potentially be my final COB meeting. But thank you. That's kind of you to say, and thanks for your comments as well.
Thank you very much, Chris. And as you say, we'll certainly take the opportunity to give you a proper send-off, as it were, at the next meeting of the council in March. So just covering off a few other items then from the corporate governance report. Just a report in public, really, some decisions that were made by the council in private last time round. So congratulations to Krishni on a 2-year extension of her term on the basis of providing some additional stability to our leadership as we go through this next period. And also to report that Maria Wogan, who was our one of our non-executive directors, finished her role on the 31st of December, and we've been in the throes of a recruitment campaign for a replacement for Maria, and governors will note that we are hoping to conclude that in the private session of the council later on this afternoon. Also in the report, we've reflected the positive outcomes of the mid-year reviews for the chair and non-executive directors, and certainly my thanks to the non-rem committee for their work in that respect in running that process for us again this year. Moving through into the membership and representation section of the report, as you will already know, my colleague Tracy Davis is acting up into the Lead for Governors and Members role, and we're pleased to report that Joe Colclough, who I think is in the meeting here this afternoon, is joining our team to provide a backfill for Tracy in this interim capacity. Jo is very well known to a number of us in the Trust. She's been working closely with Chris Oakes, our Exec Lead for Governance and HR, so she's really able to hit the ground running, and as I say, is taking the opportunity to observe this afternoon's meeting as part of her inductions process. So welcome to Jo. In other news, then, we are in the final stages of getting the new membership database on board. We've done some really productive work with our database supplier Civica and are expecting to be able to take control of the database in time for the upcoming elections process. And as governors will recall, this new database gives us much greater functionality in segmenting our membership and providing more targeted information and engagement opportunities into the future. And we'll be taking forward the use of the database with the membership and representation group over the coming months. So just to highlight, we have a couple of upcoming member webinars. We've run a successful programme of webinars so far this year, which has attracted good engagement from members of the public and members of the Trust. We've got one on CAMS, Child, Adolescent and Mental Health Services on the 2nd of February, and another on diabetes, which is happening in March. We've included in the report details of how to book a place, and we certainly would encourage you as governors and equally any members that might be listening to book onto the session. It's a really good opportunity to find out a little bit more about some of the services that are on offer locally and to answer any questions that you may have about the services and the access requirements. So a couple of points in the report that link to a later item on the agenda. Just want to highlight that we are restarting some work that we started actually pre-pandemic on developing a governor welfare protocol. So we wanted to refresh our existing protocol, which is in existence now, to be more responsive to well-being matters rather than sickness and ill health matters. So to reflect really the Trust's overall approach to well-being, more so than managing absence and unwell instances. So we're committing to taking that piece of work forward, which we'll obviously do in partnership with governors. And we would look to then bring back a final version of that welfare protocol to the Council's meeting in May for approval. In addition, another piece of work that links to that and the later item on the agenda regarding governor conduct is to re-energise the work that we'd started beforehand on the board and governor charter. So the charter, otherwise known as the Concordat, really is an expression of how the Council of Governors will work productively with the Board of Directors as two teams, as two groups of people. We got a reasonable way forward with this pre-pandemic, but we felt it made sense, given the upcoming elections, that we take the opportunity to engage governors whose terms will continue into the new period, and equally potentially new governors that are joining us in April in a discussion about how we work really productively together. So similarly, along with the welfare protocol, we'd look to bring back a version of the Governor and Board Charter to the May meeting for consideration at the Council. So we've appended to the governance report a copy of the proposed calendar for the Council of Governors for 23-24, which reflects all of the meetings that we've got planned from the Council of Governors meetings, the Nomination Committee meetings, but also our other workshop meetings. And this responds to some of the feedback we got on this year's calendar through the effectiveness review. So you'll see some of the times have changed based on people's preferences as expressed earlier this year. We're working through with the database supplier about the potential to use that as a means of issuing invites to meetings out to governors. But in the meantime, if you want to receive a calendar entry from us, just drop us a line at the Foundation Trust email account and we'll get that sent out to you. So one of the other areas that I wanted to just bring out in the report is in-person activities for governors. And by virtue of the fact of us all meeting here on Microsoft Teams, people are well aware that we've conducted most of our business during the COVID-19 pandemic via the internet virtually. And we've had a number of conversations with governors about the desire to reintroduce some in-person activities for governors. And I'm pleased to say that we are able to move forward with that as we approach the new financial year. It's important to note that we'll need to do that in conjunction with an appropriate risk assessment and in parallel with the work that we're doing with our volunteers and other members of the organisation. We're looking to adopt a similar approach for the governors. So I'm just working through with colleagues in those teams at the moment exactly what that will look like so that we can then put the appropriate measures in place. But certainly what we're committing to doing here is targeting the new induction that will happen post-elections as really the first big event that we would look to hold as a means of bringing people together to connect with each other and to connect with us as a governance team and our non-exec colleagues. But it won't stop there. We'll be doing a lot more face-to-face work into the future. We just need to make sure that we've got this risk assessment and process in place first. So, as I say, hopefully a positive signal that we will be resuming some in-person activities, and some clarification in terms of the steps we need to undertake in order to get there. Finally, I think I just wanted to highlight, yes, that we've got the most up-to-date annual work plan for the council appended to the report, really for your information. And as always, if there are any items that you wish to see featuring at the Council of Governors meeting, then do let us know. We're always welcoming feedback from governors. So I think, Christy, that's probably it in terms of the bits I wanted to draw out of the report. Really happy to take any questions that anybody may have. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Richard. Whilst giving everyone a chance to think if there are any questions you want to pose, I just really wanted to reinforce Richard's point about the webinars, because they are really great opportunities for governors and anybody that within your networks, really, because I'm right in saying, Richard, that they're not just open to governors, but members and indeed members of the public who you think might be interested in finding out more about the services. So anyone can register for these. So it's a great way of finding out more and connecting people with our services. So please do promote those, which I think will be great. And I also just wanted to say, I will bring David in a moment, but I wanted to also offer my thanks to Chris. I'll say a proper thanks at the next meeting, because that may well be Chris's last meeting, but really just the thank you for being so supportive in your offer, Chris, to support the transition period, which I know everybody on the council will be grateful for, because I think during this period of inevitable change, when we're going through some elections, it's really helpful to have the stability that your leadership provides. And I really just want to say on behalf of the council how grateful we are that you very kindly offered to do that. So thank you so much.
Thank you, Christian.
I'll bring David in, if I may. David Jones.
Thanks, Christy, and obviously the same to Chris, and to endorse what you said about the webinars. I really appreciate the intention to move towards having some meetings in person in some way. I know I've banged on about this, but it's really difficult to feel properly connected with an organisation when the only contact you have is like this online. I have, since I joined at the beginning of the pandemic, I haven't had any physical contact whatsoever with any part of NHFT, except actually one service which I did use personally. So it's really good. You just don't feel connected if you're just receiving papers and nodding on a camera from your own room. So I think that is a really good move. Having said that, we're in dangerous times and we do need to take careful risk assessments. I understand that, but thank you very much indeed for moving on that front, and let's hope we can do something. Thank you.
Thank you very much, David. I can see that another hand has gone up. So, Chris?
Yeah, thank you, Christy. Just a couple of points, really, and some reflections. Richard, thank you for your report, comprehensive as usual. I think, first of all, a big welcome to Joe on behalf of the council. It's great that you're part of the FT office team, and we individually and collectively look forward to working with you. Secondly, like Christian has recommended, the workshop about CAMHS on the 2nd of February at 4 o'clock. I can't stress enough how important, as we all can see from the statistics, that the increase of mental health and mental health ill health for young people, for me, is one of the issues of our time. And Sharon Wormsley, who is the partner governor for REACH, will be one of the presenters. And this is incredibly helpful with signposting. Recently, I was able to signpost someone who was probably 16, 17, who wasn't aware of the Espresso Yourself cafes that are run county-wide. And these are a great resource for young people who are struggling with the many pressures post-COVID. You know, we've all seen the statistics. And again, this is a partnership approach with the NHS. And I think governors would find it incredibly helpful in the conversations they're having with families, with the people they represent, and to come along. So I think that would be, just to echo what Krishni said. Secondly, the governor welfare protocol. I remember, Richard, in the days of when we had membership and governors subgroup, we worked on this because it came up through the workshops on the code of conduct, the Annex 6 work, is that how we look after ourselves, how we look after each other is really important. And Richard very kindly put together a first draft, which talks about the services available to us as governors. We are volunteers. We give of our own time and our energy, and how we can be supported by the trust and the various services that exist in terms of our own physical and emotional well-being. And also the board charter, which did appear in the first workshop we had about Annex 6. And thank you, Richard, for the commitment that that will be revisited as part of the new council. So thank you for those updates. And also I welcome the commitment to be reviewing in-person activities, because as David says, you cannot, on a basic human level, you cannot feel part of something when business and relationships are conducted on a screen. And it's about our visibility and connectivity with the trust and the services it provides, as well as our own relationships as governors and being part of something, as David says. So thank you. I welcome that commitment.
Thank you very much. Thank you everyone for your contributions. Really welcome. Richard, I don't think there was anything particularly for approval today, was there, on that particular paper? So you really just wanted us to have an update on the key activities since the last COG meeting that we'd had, relating to constitutional matters. So thank you very much for that, and thank you for your comments and questions, and please do remember to promote those webinars for us, because I think they're great opportunities, particularly as we've got Sharon as one of our governors actually involved in one of those. So the next item we have on the agenda is our governor conduct work stream. And many of you will be aware, because I think a lot of iterations of this have been out with you and shared with you, and I'm really delighted that Peter Howie, who is somebody who's been helping us with this work, is able to join us to present the approval proposal of the final documentation. I'll let Peter do a bit more of an introduction, but really big welcome to you, Peter, and thank you for leading us through this work. So over to you.
Okay, thank you, Krishni, and thank you everyone else. Can just check you can hear me all right, because I'm actually in a service station using a tethered connection. It's marvelous. Yeah, no, thank you very much. For those who I haven't met, I'm Peter Howie. I'm a former trust secretary from another mental health trust. I've also been the chair of the NHS Providers Company Secretaries Network for a while, and I've got a master's in health policy and organisation. I was asked to come in to do this piece of work that was based around some lessons learned from previous conduct procedure problems, and what I felt was really important to do, and Krishni and Richard agreed, was to use a methodology that engaged as many parties as possible, so that we did take the opportunity to engage with governors, with non-executive directors, and anyone who wanted to speak to us. So we started off clarifying and confirming what the piece of work was. We held 2 workshops and allowed other people who didn't feel able to speak in the workshop to have one-to-one calls or assisted calls. And then we looked to develop acceptable and workable solutions to everybody's point. Krishni just mentioned we've repeatedly shared the drafts, because it was really important that people had the opportunity to say so if they thought we were really going off track. So ultimately, what this work has done, taken the lessons that were there from the beginning, and then the paper today shows how we've addressed each of those, but it's produced 4 documents. One is a revised code of conduct. That revised code of conduct has a little bit more in it about preparation for role and about training. It also clarifies roles and expectations and creates that direct link to the trust leadership behaviour. So it overtly and clearly says that's the link. We've then revised Annex 6, and that revision of Annex 6 was really around strengthening the informal and supportive elements of it. It was about providing more guidance and support and direction, and putting clauses in to the annex that were about avoiding formal procedures wherever reasonable and possible and sensible. It also introduces a standards group as a group who can oversee those procedures and who can regularly review and maintain the standards. So that Annex 6 has a whole raft of new clauses in, mostly at the front end of it, mostly about the way in which the procedure should be used, about the importance of day-to-day informal management of people, helping support behaviours in the first place, and then about adopting an informal approach to dealing with governors who potentially may be straying from the path you'd want them to be on before you get into the more formal procedures. What that's enabled us to do is to look at a set of terms of reference for a standards group, which has also now been distributed. The terms of reference include setting standards for behaviour. They include setting out the expectations, reviewing any interventions that have taken place with any governors, where necessary, and it would only be where necessary, commissioning an investigation and appointing a panel. By having that separate group that does all of that, then that leaves the Council of Governors able to hear any appeals. So that process can all be handled by people who know what the situation is, by people who are involved in the trust, and can be handled more effectively than it may have been in the past using external processes. We've also produced a flow chart, which, although that isn't policy or procedure, it's designed to be a very visual pictorial guidance document, which would help everybody see it without having to wade through pages of text within the annex. So we've got a number of things there that we've produced. The paper today just goes through all of that, and what it's asking from the council is to approve the new code of conduct, to approve the revised Annex 6 to the Constitution, and to approve the establishment of a standards group and their terms of reference, and to receive and comment if necessary on the flow chart. So just a couple of procedural notes before I shut up and let people have a comment. The versions you've got are now the final versions. There's a little bit of page formatting and things that we will sort out that have come through from the tracking versions, but we'll sort page formatting and things like that out. And I think you heard in Richard's earlier paper, there's a really strong point about this is part of a slightly wider suite or package of documents, which would include the Charter and the Governor's Welfare Protocol to follow. So the intention today is to take any final comments around the documents and the setting up of a standards group, and to hopefully get the documents approved if necessary, subject to any amendments we agree today. So that's back to you, Krishni.
Thank you very much, Peter. It's a really comprehensive piece of work, and I know probably quite complicated as well for people who aren't really familiar with it. But for those of us who've used it and been involved in it, I think it's and I've seen the outcome actually, because many of you will I think have seen occasionally at times when things have had to come to council over this, that it is a more streamlined process, and that was one of the kind of things that we really wanted to achieve. So do feel free to ask any questions or make any comments if you wish. As I say, I know there's been quite a lot of interaction and sharing of this already, so you may feel comfortable with most of it, but let me bring in Helen first of all. Helen, please.
Thank you. It was just a brief one. I believe I had sent some feedback back on this and also mentioned it at the Governor Ned Forum. The content, absolutely fine, no issues with content at all. But in the interests of making Annex 6 a little bit more aspirational rather than a heavy blow to the body, I wondered whether the last two sections, 5 and 6, could be moved to the beginning of the Annex 6 document. So you start Annex 6 by saying what the roles and responsibilities of the Council of Governors are, and then you follow it through with the lead governor and deputy governor, and then you move on to the and when things go wrong. For me, it just feels like it would read more positively and give better flow.
I think that's a very good point, Helen. And Richard and I have had the conversation. We can certainly do that. It's just an administrative process of renumbering all the paragraphs and references and things. So we can do that. We didn't want to do it before today because we didn't want to confuse anyone who was making comment based on reference numbers and things like that. But if that is the wish of the council, then to help Richard and Tracy out, I'll do that piece of work and just renumber everything and shuffle it around.
Okay, thank you very much, Helen. I can see that Mark and Sharon certainly have indicated they would be supportive, as of David. So I think unless people have any particular concerns about that, it sounds like a very sensible thing to do, and a sort of better way of positioning it. So we can certainly agree at this point that it's sort of, if we're happy to approve it, it will be just on the basis of making that administrative change. Chris, can I invite you to come in?
Yes, thank you very much. I just wanted to say that as governors, we had 2 workshops, and which Peter was involved in. I wanted to say thank you to all the governors who've contributed, who've made their comments, who've added their thoughts and reflections on what is a really, really important piece of work. And this is a suite of documents that come before us. I want to thank Peter for his diligence and bringing his expertise to bear, but also taking the time to listen. The conversations, sometimes you and I have had, Peter, with governors who didn't feel able to perhaps attend the workshops, but nonetheless wanted their voice to be heard. And that in itself is really important. And I certainly think that the Code of Conduct, when we started this, which we wanted to make more aspirational, we wanted it to be linked to the leadership behaviours of the trust around, I think I've got them right, working together, being authentic, taking responsibility and embracing change. And we are an integral part of the trust, and we want to have those, mirrored in terms of our Code of Conduct and how we operate. And equally the Annex 6, which is important, it needs to be there. But I do think the work that's gone in terms of the flowchart and the opportunity for some informal interactions brings to an end a really important piece of work where people have come to bring their own experience and their own skills to bear to make sure this is fit for purpose as we sit here now. And I think that's really important. And I'm glad Helen raised the point, because I was going to suggest that, because she and I spoke about that. Because as it stands, it does seem a bit stark, and let's talk about actually what we are here for, and then bring in the other stuff. So just a thanks to every governor involved for their contributions to this important piece of work, and to the NEDs who came to the workshops as well. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Chris. And I think, Chris makes a really important point about the alignment to the leadership behaviours, because actually that really felt quite an important part of it, as those are very core to the way that the organisation works and aspires to behave towards colleagues. So it felt really important to enshrine that within this. So it sounds like there's no other questions or comments. I just have a practical one before I just check with everybody that well, in fact, maybe first of all, check, is everyone happy to support the changes that are proposed? I mean, there's obviously a list of things that Peter asked approval for. I'm not going to repeat those, but they're obviously very clearly laid out in the paper. But can I just check, subject to the change that Helen proposed, which we've already, I think, acknowledged is a very sensible one to make. Can I check everyone's comfortable with approving the changes, because I think that the next step will be that those changes need to go forward to some of those changes need to go forward as part of the constitutional change. Is that right, Richard?
It is, Krishna, yes.
Great, thank you. So I can see there's support for it, so thank you very much. Just in practical terms, Richard, what happens after we've approved the constitutional change, which is a board as a requirement of the board to do? How will we, between you and Peter, can you just give us an idea of how we will then take it forward to actually practically implement it? Is that something we've been able to give some thought to?
Yes, of course. So from a sort of technical point of view, of course, once we've updated the Constitution, that will be published on the website and will become the new version of the Constitution. As governors will recall, all governors need to sign a copy of the Code of Conduct. So we will need to implement a process to ask governors to sign the new version of the Code of Conduct as well. And the next key action, of course, then will be seeking interest in joining the standards group and getting the standards group up and running. And I think we've included in the pack the proposed terms of reference for that group. So we'll be again in dialogue with governors about the membership of that group, so we can start the ball rolling there. I think those are the main points, Peter. Have I missed anything there?
No, I think you've covered all the points, Richard. The only other key action, of course, is after the board's approved it, it's a constitution change. You need to send a copy of the constitution to NHS England. But other than that, that's the only other thing I can think of.
Great, thank you very much, Peter and Richard. I think, you know, also I would sort of say at this stage, obviously, you know, you can look at the papers and consider this further, but it's a great opportunity. I mean, I'm hoping we don't need to use it very often in many ways, but actually it's another way in which governors who've got the capacity can be involved in managing, you know, the council's affairs, if you like, and council's business. And we've obviously got governors who sit on the nominations and remuneration committee of the council, and this will be the standards group that's outlined in the documentation. Actually is another opportunity for members of the council to be involved in something that is important as part of how we run our business and manage council's affairs, if you like. So I would just encourage you all to give some thought to it, because we want the widest possible representation, I think, from members of the council and all of these sorts of groups that we need to run. So do give that some thought, but obviously the formal invitation for that will follow in due course once this has run its appropriate approval process. So thank you. Chris, final comment?
Yeah, just sorry, forgive me if this sounds a bit pedantic, but just for the purposes of the minutes, could we please capture that whilst not an integral part of this suite of documents, running alongside this is the Governor and Board Charter, the Governor Welfare Protocol, which, whilst not an integral part of what we're approving today, are nonetheless pieces of work that run alongside that do have an impact on the overall code and how we work together. So if that could just be captured in the minutes, I'd be grateful. Thank you for bearing with me.
Thank you, Chris. Yes, I'm sure that can. And I think indeed it's noted in any case also in Richard's report as well, I think, as part of the action that we need to take forward. David?
Will the minutes show that this was approved unanimously, Krishni?
Yes, so can I just check if anyone has got any concerns to highlight them, because it's probably, given the size of the group, and we are fully quorate, I know, because we had a lot of people joining us just literally a minute or two after we started. If anyone has got any concerns, there is an opportunity to highlight them, so please feel free to do that, and I can bring you in. King, did you want to come in? I can see
Yes.
that you, yeah.
Yes, my hand is up. Just a very, very quick question. I'm trying to follow as best as I can, given it's my first meeting. Reading through all these papers is a wonderful thing. But just sort of, we are discussing the code of conduct for governors, and just there's a point there's a point in news social media that we should not express any political view. That's very difficult in my capacity as a politician. So what sort of is it in relation to when I'm representing as an ambassador the NHFT? Because of course I'm sure I can't restrain myself from having a political view. Christy, over to you.
Yeah, it's a perfectly reasonable question, King. I completely understand why you would ask that, but and you're absolutely right in your interpretation. But I will just go to the expertise of Peter and Richard just to confirm that. But that would be my expectation, that clearly in your own capacity as a councillor, you know, that is very clearly a political, you know, I was going to say appointment, but obviously you're an elected member of the council. It's in all matters relating to you representing NHFT. So if you were identifying yourself as an NHFT governor, I think that's when you just need to be mindful of any sort of political connotations associated with that. Richard or Peter, did you want to comment any further on that?
I think you've hit the nail right on the head, Christian. That's exactly what it is.
Great. Okay, is that okay, King, that you're happy with that? And I think that I don't think that causes any conflict. And importantly, I know your interest, you know, you're here very much as a representative of the council, so we absolutely, as part of that, recognise that you will have a political affiliation. So thank you very much. So I'll take it that in the absence of any indications to the contrary, responding to David's point, that this is a unanimous approval of the documentation, and we'll take that forward in the way that Richard and Peter have described. And I'll take the opportunity again to thank Peter, you know, really for this really comprehensive piece of work, and particularly, as Chris highlighted, the sort of level of engagement that has been undertaken as part of developing this. So thank you very much indeed. Okay, so if we're happy to move on, we go to another matter of council business that we've been working through for a little while, I think, following the council's effectiveness review. And the item is item number 7, our future council. These are sort of fairly constitutional matters, so I'm conscious for you know, sort of perhaps newer governors, these will be sort of you know, perhaps more challenging to get your head around, but hopefully Richard will be able to kind of talk you through the rationale for the proposals. So over to you, Richard.
Thanks very much, Christy. Yes, and as you alluded to, this paper, this item stems from a mandate that we were given by the council earlier this year to consider the future composition of the council to ensure a good fit really with our new operating context, to ensure we can fulfil our duties to the best possible extent. So you'll see set out in the paper the drivers for change, which in part stemmed from that effectiveness review in the summer, in articulating what it was that the council viewed as a success. It also notes some other drivers for change, such as a change in national guidance with the new code of governance coming in April, and of course the advent of the integrated care system, integrated care board and integrated care partnerships, changing the landscape somewhat in terms of here in Northamptonshire. So firstly, thanks very much to a number of governors and NEDs that were involved in some workshops where we've really got underneath the role of the governor, the role of the council, and what was really important in terms of the future functioning of the council. Some really helpful conversations, I think, that have informed the proposals that are set out in this paper. And just as a bit of a reminder, when the council gave the mandate for this piece of work, it was seeking to improve representation, to allow greater investment per governor by reducing the overall size of the council, and to reset the governor constituencies to meet the needs of the future operating context that I've alluded to in this new integrated care system arena. So you'll see that we've taken a pretty comprehensive look at the different constituencies within the council, as I said, with reference to any national requirements, some of which are national guidance, some of which are legal requirements from the Act. And we've put forward 5 proposals here, which reflect, incidentally, the consensus reached by the group of governors and NEDs that were working on this together. I've tried to bring them out of the report, picking up, I think, King's point about some rather detailed papers here, apologies for that, by putting them in a box. It might be worth just stepping through each of the 5 proposals, the 5 boxes, just so we're clear on what's being proposed. So to turn first then to proposal number 1, which concerns the public constituency. So since the council was originally constituted, of course, we've had a change in our local authorities in Northamptonshire, and we've moved to a position where we have a north and a west unitary council. Most of the constituency boundaries sitting beneath those 2 authorities have remained largely the same, but what we've recognised also is the population has changed since we set out the original constitution. So we took the opportunity to consider actually where people are living in Northamptonshire, and to then have a balance of governors that reflects where the population is. And we've determined that by having more governors in the Northampton area, reflecting of a greater population density in that area, would be a better balance of governors per head of population across the county. So overall, the proposal concerning public governors is to effect a reduction from 13 to 10 overall, of course retaining 1 governor that represents our Rest of England constituency. The second area that we examined was what's overall headed up patient governors, but includes adult service user, younger service user, and carer governors. We had a really important conversation, I think, here about the role of the patient and carer voice on the council. We took the opportunity to look at what some other organisations have done in this area, and we considered the proposal that others have considered, which is actually to dispense with a bespoke constituency for patients and to receive the patient voice through public constituencies and other means. And I think there was a really clear consensus that that particular model was not right for NHFT, and we wanted to retain a distinct patient and carer constituency on our council. And what we considered also was a matter that the council's considered before, which is trying to drive more younger and children participation in our work as a council, and previously having the greater proportion of governors in this constituency pinned to adult service users, it was felt that could be restrictive for younger service users coming forward to be representatives. Of course, we also noted that we've had a really strong representation from our carer governors, and that was something we, of course, wanted to retain into the future. So what we're seeing here in terms of the second proposal is to try and remove the barriers between the constituencies by having a single patient and carer constituency, and again effecting a modest reduction in the overall numbers in tune with that mandate from the council to have greater investment per capita governor. It's probably worth just noting, particularly for those governors that were involved in the task and finish group, that the law, basically the NHS Act 2006, restricts us in terms of what we can do with classes of governors within this constituency. Apologies for a slightly technical point here. So we're either able to have 1 overall patient constituency, or we need to have 3 constituencies. So in order to remove the barriers, therefore, we couldn't go for having 2 constituencies, which is what we'd hoped to do, and have a carer constituency and a patient constituency. We've had to propose to have 1 overall. So hopefully that's clear, but I'll happily answer any questions on that when we get to that point. So moving through then staff constituency, we had again a good conversation about this with reference to the balance of staff across the trust, noting that proportionately we have more registered and unregistered nursing staff than we do, I think, in any other staff group across the organisation. And yet again, a bit like the service user constituencies we were just talking about, and we've actually got the same number of representatives per constituency in our council. So in tandem with the proposal to remove barriers to people standing as governors, what we're proposing here for the staff governor constituency, with reference to what other organisations have done, is to have a single class of staff governors as we move forward into the future. In this case, it's worth noting, of course, that we wouldn't be able to affect the change here until posts become vacant, which in this case will be in 2024. And then last but by no means least, in terms of constituency matters, we considered our partner governors who make an important contribution to the council. And these governors are slightly different in the sense that they're not elected as such, at least in terms of being elected onto NHFT's council, of course, picking up King's earlier point. But they are in fact appointed by partners of NHFT with reference to the council. So again, the group felt that we'd had a really strong contribution from partner governors, and indeed reflected on the new landscape where we're working as part of an integrated care system, with partnership being a really important feature of our future needs as a trust and as a council going forward. I think what we'd also recognise was that there's also a need to be really clear what's the role of a partner governor as opposed to a partner of NHFT, and what specifically the council needs from partner representation as opposed to potentially what the organisation needs from a partner. And I think it was with that in mind, recognising other connections that some of our previous partner constituencies have had with the trust, we felt that actually we could reduce the number of partner governors by 2, while still maintaining a really strong base of partner governors and strong connections with all of our key partners as an organisation there. So you can see in proposal 4 that we're proposing, in order to do that, that we would remove the now vacant criminal justice seat and the NREC seat as part of that proposal. And I think that it's worth noting in proposal number 5, which is, you'll be pleased to hear, the final of the proposals from the Task and Finish group, was that we felt actually we probably needed to let the ICS and system context mature a little bit more and come back again for a second review as those arrangements become clearer. And in particular, we were talking about the burgeoning integrated care partnership arrangements to reflect local place arrangements, which I think we felt were really key in understanding governors' connections to their local communities. So what we're proposing here with number 5 is that we take the opportunity during the 23-24 financial year to have another look together at the changes that we've made, to check whether those are working well, and to see if there are any further changes that we wish to make as we move forward. So of course, this being a change to council composition, we couldn't make a change without a change to our constitution, which, like the previous item, subject to the agreement today, we would then need to propose to the board for its approval at the end of the month. And then, as we mentioned earlier on, from a practical point of view, publish on our website and ensure a copy goes to NHS England. What we've also put in this paper to try and reduce the number of papers, I guess, coming through to the council, is some information about our upcoming governor elections. So as colleagues will know, we have a number of people that are reaching the end of their term of office with the trust, and we naturally therefore are obliged to run governor elections, which typically kick off in the February-March time, conclude in April. So again, depending on the proposals that are agreed this afternoon, that will enable us to then proceed with elections into those newly configured constituencies for the council. I should point out that the length of the paper is in large part due to the fact that we've included the changes to the constitution as an annex to that paper, so you can see there specifically what would be changing. So with apologies for a slightly detailed paper and a long explanation, hopefully that set out clearly at least where we've arrived at in terms of the work of the Task and Finish group and the proposals this afternoon. I suspect there will be some discussion and questions, so I'll hand back to you, Krishni, to take us through that. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Richard. Obviously, as Richard explained, this was important to conclude before we start an election process, because as actually any decisions we make around this today would be the basis on which we go forward to our elections, which I think are due to start in February, if I remember correctly. And indeed, I think there's a very helpful summary of the election timeline right at the back in Appendix 2, which just sets out how we would go forward if actually this is supported. So I think what Richard's done is sort of talked you through really the considerations that I think members of the council have given to the proposals, and actually where the sort of consensus was achieved about changes that could be made, because obviously we wanted to be cognizant of people who are already in post and taking account of vacancies and those sorts of things. So I think the solution is a pragmatic one, from what I've heard from Richard, as a means of sort of taking advantage of some vacancies that already exist and making some small changes that would perhaps make some of our constituencies a little bit more streamlined. So I think that's my take on it, but I absolutely welcome any comments or questions that anyone would like to raise at this stage. Carol, please.
Thank you, Krishni. Richard, it was just a question because we did have a conversation about patients versus service users. I assume, therefore, that has been clarified now.
Thank
Yes.
you, Carol. Richard, do you want to respond?
Good point, Carol. So yes, for the benefit of everybody in the room, we had really quite an interesting discussion about, I suppose, the connotation, really, if we use the term patient or service user and what that means. And there was a discussion whether actually service user felt more of a mental health service user term or not. And I think where we landed was that in the national guidance in the legislation, the term patient is used as the overarching heading, and therefore to bring us into line with that, we proposed that is the term that we would use here. And of course, then in all of our communications, we can ensure that we do that in an inclusive way, so that people are not feeling excluded. But I think there were pros and cons of going with service user or going with patient. And I think, as you allude to, Carol, we had a good discussion about that in our Task and Finish group meeting.
Thank you, Richard.
Thank you, Carol. Chris, please.
Yeah, can you bear with me, because I'm trying to look at two screens here, because take a breath, everyone. There is a lot of detail in here. There is a lot of detail, and it reflects a lot of hard work. We've given this a lot of thought and consideration at that group. And just to revisit, if I may, one of the guiding principles for us as a council to review the composition included, I think it was 4 things: governors reflecting the communities they serve, good membership levels, which would lead to contested elections, our resource matches our ambitions on membership engagement, and I'll come back to that. Well-attended council meetings, a meeting organised to maximise attendance, which we've touched upon in terms of potentially in person, and then specific proposals on changes to the composition that not just improved representation, but allowed greater investment per governor. And to that extent, I think the road goes both ways, in the sense that one of our governors at the workshop spoke very well about, having a tailored plan. So forgive me, is it King or Lowell King? I do apologise. If I got your name wrong, I do apologise. As a new governor coming onto the council, how can we support you with a very tailored approach? And I think as governors, we have been saying for some time that irrespective of the constituencies we represent, we are the voice of the local communities, whether we are staff, public, so patients, carers. And we do need a mechanism to bring that voice back to the trust, and to do so in a systematic way. So a challenge, if I may offer the board, is that, as you all know, it's a statutory requirement for us as governors to represent the interests of members and members of the public. And the new governance talks about the wider system population. And that has been reinforced in the new Code of Governance for Trust, which has to be done and respected. The unique offer we have is democratic accountability. And whether we have 20, 30 or 15 on the council, we do need to say a much improved, greater investment, which is why Tracy and Joe and Richard, so that we can bring that to life. Because I certainly, in my conversations with the governors over the last few years, it is clear that they have hopes, ambitions, expectations for the people they serve. And I've said this word, we need the trust to honour that. So within all of this debate around the legal, the governance, the constitutional changes, and we've done this in a co-produced, collective way. Richard, thank you as ever. But let's not lose sight of the bigger picture here, if I may, that this is about enabling governors, individually and collectively, whatever constituency they represent, to bring that voice back of the local communities, which is very, very important, not least at this present time. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Chris. Richard, was there anything you wanted to comment on as part of, in response to that?
Yes, happy to. So I think you're exactly right, Chris. Part of the proposal links to some of the other items on the agenda, isn't it, really, about how we're actually proposing to then come alongside governors and work together in constituencies. And so with this new structure with a slightly smaller number of governors, it gives us better able to match corporate governance resource to individual governor resource. And part of the thinking is to have that sort of tailored plan per constituency, really, so that we can be really clear both what are the needs of the people in that constituency, and also actually what is it that governors are planning to do in that constituency, what support do they need from me and my team, and potentially the broader trust for that matter. So yeah, certainly a firm commitment to moving forward with that, Chris, along the lines that you've described. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Richard. I think there was a comment from Sharon, please.
Just have a question about the partner governors. If you're updating the constitution effectively, then are you going to detail which partner governors you think should be on the board? I know, obviously, from a practical perspective, if you're reducing the number of partner governors, it's good to take out those that are free to go, are available now. But is there thought as to which partner governors you want, or are you leaving it open in the constitution?
Richard, do you want to respond to that?
Yeah, happy to. Thanks, Krishni. Good question, Sharon. Yes, the only changes that we're proposing to make to the current partner governors are to remove those two listed in recommendation number 4, so the youth criminal justice and the NREC position. All other partner governors we would propose to retain. As you say, we'd want to, as part of that 5th recommendation, to have a look at the composition again in 23-24, would want to engage partner governors and everybody in a discussion in that new place context to ensure that we've got the right balance. But in terms of what we're proposing today, yes, it's just those 2 posts that would be proposed to change. I hope that's helpful.
Thanks, Sharon. David?
Thank you, Krishni. I'm not going to take up time debating service user or patient or whatever, but that's a huge subject and it's very significant for people. So, but not for now. I just wanted to comment on the partner element. It might seem strange in the current context to reduce the number of partners on the council. And I thank you, Richard, for very faithfully representing the view of the working group. But just to stress that it seems in the new structures that there are more, if you like, personal, effective and productive ways for partners to engage with the trust than through the Board of Governors. And we've said we want to review all of this when we've more experience of the integrated care system and see how that is working in practice. But I think we would want to stress, I hope the governors would stress, that reduces the number of partners is not saying that partners are not important, but is saying that there are other effective ways for partners to engage. And we want to make it easy for partners to engage and recognise the time commitments are involved and the productiveness of the different structures, and want to review how NHFT is working with its partners, which I understand the new national governance guidance is saying anyway. So I thought we ought to have on record that reducing the number of partners is recognising they are important and recognising that there are other structures where those discussions can have. But if those are not working well or are not sufficient, then we need to review our own arrangements. I hope that makes sense, Krishni.
It's a really important point, David, and I think you made that incredibly well. And it's interesting. I think talking to the colleague who actually chose to step down, who was in the criminal justice seat. I mean, we actually had that sort of conversation with her, because he extensively works with colleagues in NHFT as part of partnership arrangements that are already in place. And actually, there was some confusion as to the value then that being a governor on the council might bring. So I think it's thinking about how we use partner governors to represent the voice of a particular constituency. I mean, I think Sue and I know talked about that. As Sue, I know, as sort of the Age UK representative. It's a very really strong way for us to use Sue, not just in her capacity as a partner, you know, a key partner within the system, but actually representing the constituency of older people who access services. So it's thinking about sort of that partner, you know, and Sharon in her role with the Reach collaboration, you know, that's very much about young people. So there is, I think, that opportunity to make that connection. And where those perhaps the value is less clear, it's you know, partner governors themselves have indicated it's probably not a great way of me continuing my interaction with the organisation, which is already strong. So I think David's point is really, really important.
Krishni, I think
yes.
we need to make sure we have reports to the board just to let us know the progress on that matter.
Yes, of course. Thank you, David. Okay. Are there any other comments that anyone wants to?
Could I come back in? Please,
yes,
Chris?
please, Chris.
Just a very quick. David put it far better than I, and Sharon, I hope that's reassured you in terms of, you know, you're still very much an integral member of the council, and I think we do need to look at this, as you say, in different ways. David said it far better than me, but in terms of how you could co-opt people, or certainly I remember when Sue and Mark gave a presentation to the council in their own right about the work of North Ends Carers, about Age UK, hugely informative, and I think we need to find perhaps place on the agenda for some of our partner governors to give an update. One final thing from me, please, and it's just in relation. We all know that the landscape across health and social care is changing, as is our responsibility as governors to represent the interests of people within the integrated care system. And Richard and I talked about this, but with the development of place-based meetings, local area partnerships, community wellbeing forums, there is a brilliant opportunity for tailored support for governors, whichever constituency represent, notwithstanding staff, to be involved in those forums to respond to the challenges that we face locally as a community and wider as a society. So yes, let's look at that within the context of all these constitutional changes. Thank you, Richard. Thank you, Krishni.
Thank you very much, Chris. So can I just check whether anybody objects to the proposals or wishes to clarify anything further? And if not, can I take it that you're supportive of this with the proviso that obviously some of this is phased in effect, isn't it, Richard? It's a sort of so some of the changes won't take effect immediately, but what it does allow us to do is go forward with this next set of elections with a clear set of seats that we're targeting for election based on vacancies that we have, and then some changes that we'll be able to implement in 2024 when other terms come to an end and we can go out for election for a slightly different set of requirements, particularly the Star constituency, I think was the one that you cited in relation to that. So can I confirm that everybody is supportive then of those proposals? Great. I'll take that as an approval. So thank you very much. And thank you again, Richard, for the work you've done. And indeed, thank you to all the colleagues who've contributed to it, because it's been another one of these projects that we've had a lot of dialogue about. And it's great that we've been able to get it to this point so that we can in effect go forward with our plans to elections and really start afresh in April with a slightly revised composition. Now, the final item we have on our agenda before we are due a short break is our staff story. And I'm really delighted that Krishna Yathiraj, who's one of our consultants, is actually going to do his staff story. So we're hearing from Krishna. And actually, just to link back to the point that Chris made, one of the things we talked about is once we've concluded all the sort of stories from staff, we may then think about, actually, could we get our partner governors to talk a little bit about the work that they do? So delighted to invite Krishna to speak. I think, Krishna, you haven't got any particular slides you wanted to use, but we've got about 10 minutes or so for you to tell us a bit about you and what you do. Thank you, Krishna.
Thank you very much. Firstly, I just want to start off by apologizing for the fact that I haven't been able to be as active a governor as I wanted to be when I started. It's been for various reasons that's been the case. Mainly because I have actually changed my clinical role a couple of times since I started working as a governor. So I've actually had to focus on adapting myself to my new roles. Anyway, yes, so I'm a consultant psychiatrist working with NHFT for around 7 or 8 years now. I work on the inpatient ward, currently on Kingfisher Ward, St. Mary's Hospital. Prior to that, I was working in Berrywood Hospital for 6 years on Cove Ward and Harbour Ward. I then had a bit of a change. I went to work with the crisis team in the community, but I didn't really enjoy it as much as I enjoy working on the wards. I think that's where I'm most comfortable, I'm most satisfied, and that's why I went back to the ward, but this time to St. Mary's. My duties mainly involve, looking after my patients on the ward, doing ward rounds on a daily basis, attending tribunals, mental health act assessments, MDT meetings, supervising students, my junior doctors, teaching medical students, things like that. I really enjoy my job. What I like most about my job, especially working on the wards, is that I'm able to be part of the journey of the patient, wherein they come in, they're very unwell, they're really poorly, and then they get better, and then they're discharged. So it's like you complete your journey with the patient and you get a sense of closure, which is very important, and it's very satisfying. My patients usually tend to come with various diagnoses, but the most common one is schizophrenia, psychosis, bipolar disorder, manic episodes. Sometimes people have personality disorders, and also comorbid drug misuse problems, alcohol misuse problems. One of the most challenging things that I find in my role is that actually trying to organize effective follow-up in the community. So liaising with different agencies, social services, community mental health teams, and all of that, making sure that whatever progress the patient makes on the ward is sustained in the community, and whatever plan we make is carried out in the same way in the community as well. But that's not so straightforward due to liaising with other teams, and I don't have much control over the community teams. So I find that a bit challenging. But most of the time we work together as a team, and everyone tries their best. The other thing that I'm involved with is quality improvement. And with regards to quality improvement projects, I have focused on carers. And I noted a long time ago that the support that we provide to carers is not very much. And they take a lot of responsibility in looking after their loved ones. But I think if we provided more support to the carers, the chances of our patients recovering completely and maintaining their recovery is much more. So I started liaising with Northamptonshire carers. We used to have Chrissy Brown initially, who used to come to the ward and meet my carers. And then we started a group for carers called Carers Corner. That's been running for around 4 years now. Initially, we used to do it in person, and then because of the pandemic, we moved online. It's got good feedback. The carers find it very helpful. And I was recognized by Northamptonshire carers a couple of years ago, and they gave me an award called the Shining Star Award for reaching out to carers. And in December last year, NHFT also recognized me for Carers Corner, and I got the Quality Award for engagement and involvement. So I'm pleased with that, but at the same time, I do feel that there's a lot more we can do for carers, and I would like to have more support in place for them, more groups for them, more education, more resources, more voice and visibility for carers, because I think they have a lot to contribute, and it would be get them actively involved more and more. And also to liaise more closely with Northamptonshire carers as well. I think a lot of the staff at NHFT need to have more awareness of Northamptonshire carers, and for some reason that's not been happening. In fact, on System 1, the computer system that we use, there is a referral form inbuilt to refer carers to Northamptonshire carers, but I don't think it's really used much, and I'm not sure many staff are even aware of it. So I think we need to just try and spread the name of Northamptonshire carers a bit more, and encourage all the staff in NHFT to routinely refer carers to Northamptonshire carers, because they do a fantastic job. I have very close contact with them, and I see exactly what they do. They help them in all other aspects, not just emotional support, not just moral support, financial advice, practical advice, so many different ways, which is fantastic. So I'm even also open to suggestions. I'm very keen to listen to the opinions of my fellow governors and colleagues. How can we improve the support that we provide to carers? How can we liaise better with Northamptonshire carers? I think this is one area where we can do a lot more, and I'm hoping that in the future we can achieve that. I think I've finished my time. Thank you very much for listening to me.
Krishna, thank you so much. And if you weren't going to mention it, I'd written down, because I was at the Quality Award ceremony, as was Angela, and I remembered you getting the award. So I was going to mention that, because that was just in December, I think, wasn't it? The Quality Award for the Carers Corner. And I think, you make such an important point, which I know will resonate. And there's a couple of comments from colleagues already about, obviously, we have got people here who are carer governors, Paul Kelly, I think Fiona Judge, there are several people here on this group who are carer governors. I think Paul, I remember quite early on telling me that how good Carers Corner was. I hope he still feels the same, but I remember he was very positive about that. And of course, we've got Mark Major here as CEO and partner governor representative for Northamptonshire Carers. So it seems to me we've got quite a sort of special, an interest group, and there will be others who will have experience, not necessarily as carers themselves, but the important role that carers have played in supporting them. And then there will be colleagues, no doubt, other partner governors, for example, who may well have a very strong interest in this. It's something I remember actually we were talking about on a while ago in the Health and Wellbeing Board for Northamptonshire County, the Northamptonshire County Council, were Health and Wellbeing Board, albeit the changes obviously have happened in terms of the authority. So it's probably something, Richard, we can consider, maybe if people are supportive of Krishna's suggestion, that we might want to try and convene some sort of conversation about what we can do better, Krishna, using your suggestion to tap into interested parties on this governor group, because I think there will be people who have a strong interest in this, and I think that would be very welcome if you're up for that. I know you're a very busy person, so we've always got to recognise that with our staff governors, but it sounds like a really good opportunity because you're obviously so interested in that. I can see there are a few people who want to come in, so I'll just bring people in briefly before we go for a break. So firstly, Chris.
Yes, thank you. I think what an excellent idea. I mean, we talked earlier about, you know, the need for us as governors to, if you like, to find ways of, you know, developing our visibility and connectivity with the trust. And here is one great example. You know, I think, Krishna, with the carer governors, we have Paul Kelly, as you say, he's involved in Carers Corner, and potentially even a members event. Because I remember Mark, and he'll correct me if I'm wrong here, when he said how many carers are there in the population of Northamptonshire, and at the risk of sounding a smart aleck, I thought it must be about 10%, 75,000 of them. And he said, no, it's nearer 125, nearly 130,000 people are carers. And particularly in the area of mental ill health and support, I think this could potentially lead to a members event, a panel discussion, however you want to do it. But yeah, I would absolutely endorse your suggestion, Krishni, about making sure that we join up our carer governors with Paul, Fiona, with Krishna, to give some thought as to how, in response to Krishna's, you know, cry for support, we're here and we can help each other. So thank you, Krishna.
Thank you very much, Chris. Joanne, please.
Yeah, thank you for highlighting about the referral form. I didn't know about that, and just 2 days ago I googled Northampton carers and gave that number to somebody that has been referred into our service, who unfortunately had an operation that went terribly wrong in Addenbrooks, and so their life has changed and they are looking for, you know, they're absolutely at sea to deal with this set of circumstances that they find themselves in. So that's really important. And yeah, I didn't know anything about that referral form, Mark. So thank you for highlighting that.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Joanne. And you know, it's probably those sorts of things that we need to think about. How do we make that more visible to people? And indeed, you know, I was going to mention that we have a working carers network within NHFT for staff, recognising that staff are often carers as well. And how can we support people who play such an important part in supporting the community, really. Julie, and then Matt Galby. So Julie first, please.
Krishna, thank you. I think for me, and making sure that we're linking in with Tendai, who's our head of patient experience, and that includes carers. I mean, I think there's some really great work, Krishna, and I thank you for what you're doing, and I think we can do more. I mean, I'm a great advocate of Northamptonshire carers and worked lots over the years with Northamptonshire carers, and I know we work very closely with them, but I know there's lots more we can do. So please involve Tendai. I'm sure she would want to be involved because actually we work together, and I'm sure she's already aware of the work you're doing actually, but actually we can probably do more. And we certainly, having sat and listened, we need to get some communication out to staff around the referral form and how easy it is to do and the responsiveness of Northamptonshire carers. You know, this is not something new. It's been nearly 20 years, I think, I've been involved with Northamptonshire carers. I can think back to when I was more clinical and we were doing it then. So actually, let's get some comms out, let's get it sorted. But if I can be of any help or support, but do talk to Tendai as well.
Thank you, Julie. That's helpful.
Sorry, Tendai did invite me to a carers workshop. It's on the 25th of January, and I am going to that. So I will be speaking to Tendai on that day. Thanks.
Great. Thank you, Krishna. Finally, Matt.
Yeah, thank you, Krishni, and thank you for the words that were spoken a little while ago. You mentioned, Krishni, the Health and Wellbeing Board, and in its current form, I'm the chair of the West Health and Wellbeing Board, and I think it would be great to have the speaker we've just had come to address our Health and Wellbeing Board to talk about you know, your experiences and especially about carers and the value of carers, because to me, and I'm sure everybody realises, they're just grossly undervalued, and we've got to put a bigger stock behind the value that we get from our carers across the board. So maybe there's something we can take away and get an item on the, you know, our next Health and Wellbeing Board. Thank you.
Great. Thank you very much, Matt. And Mark, I think Northamptonshire Carers won an award as well, didn't they? Quite recently at the HSJ. So, you know, there's something here about sort of visibility and about making sure that, you know, we're really kind of raising the communication. So conscious that we've you know, said that there are some really important opportunities here. I think we probably just need to touch base with Tendai and Krishna and Mark and others just to see how do we just connect everything up and make sure you know, we take it forward in a pragmatic way. But it sounds like a great opportunity to shine that spotlight on carers. And I think it sounds like everyone's very supportive of that, Krishna. So just by talking with you, I know carers is one aspect of the work you do, but I think it has helped us to just reminded us really about that really important role. So perhaps we can consider how we take that forward offline, as I'm conscious a little bit of the time. I should be letting you have a break now, so I'll just bring David in for a final comment, and we'll go for a break shortly. So David.
Very quickly, yes, the carers discussion really important. Got some family experience of that as well from some years ago now, but I also didn't want to lose Krishna's comments about the problems of connecting up services and the experience of those who have mental health problems in the community. If we don't get those working smoothly, then people just return to hospital and their lives and their carers' lives are messed up. I know Matt will have that on his agenda for the Health and Wellbeing Board, but we have to remember that as well as the carers' needs.
Absolutely, and I'm sure it'll be on the agenda for the Mental Health Collaborative, which obviously is something that we're absolutely driving within the system. Krishna, thank you so much for shining a light on what you do. Another great way of sort of sparking a conversation, which I think we found with all of these presentations. And I know Richard and the team will have a look at who we want to sort of, because we do want to carry on with this, but it may be, as we said, if we've done, I don't know if we've done all the staff governors, but I'll check with Richard and we'll certainly plan more of these sorts of sessions. So thank you very much. Can I suggest we take a break now? Back, everybody. I think we've got most people back, and I think we can make a start on our strategy and assurance section. So item number 9 is reports of the Chair and Chief Executive. You have available to you report G, which is my report to the last Board of Directors. Actually, the key thing that has moved on since then is the recruitment process that will be covered in the private council relating to non-executive director recruitment. So I'm not going to make any further comment on that at this stage. So I'll just take the opportunity to invite Angela Hillary, our Chief Executive, to really just obviously draw our attention to anything from her previous report, but more importantly, just because there's a lot of things happening within the NHS. I think Angela will want to take the opportunity to give you an update on sort of what's on the top of her agenda at the moment. So over to you, Angela.
Thanks, Krishna, and yes, that's exactly what I was going to do. So hi everybody, and Happy New Year to everybody I've not come across yet in the year. So 3 topics that I just wanted to touch on today with everybody. And not unsurprisingly, the first one is the critical incident that we found ourselves in as an organisation within January, from the 5th of January to about the 9th of January. And just to, again, share with colleagues that this was as a result of a lot of pressure that was being felt across all of the county. And clearly our acute colleagues are also in a critical incident stage. And we felt that in our organisation, we have a way of monitoring our levels of pressures, OPAL levels they're called, 1 to 4, and 4 is the most severe. And we were at level 4 as an organisation. And in addition to that, we'd also got some system requests to act differently in terms of accommodating additional patients or working differently with staffing. So all of that culminated in us declaring a critical incident. That's the right thing to do in terms of our emergency planning. It also allows us to put our focus very much on safety first, as we always do, but to galvanise people to act and support those particular safety requirements. And that enabled us to step down the incident on the 9th of January and to report that back into the system. I can only say how brilliant our staff were. Once again, I know you hear me say that a lot, but I will keep saying it because they are. They were fantastic. They absolutely stepped up. They went above and beyond. People mobilised to support in different ways, and we managed and mitigated very well indeed. And as you'd expect, we managed to monitor throughout that period of safety as we would, to see if there was anything that materialised in that period. Now, clearly, we still remain in challenge positions. So stepping down a critical incident does not mean everything goes back to how it should be. This is a very challenging period, the winter period, and we know our system partners still remain in critical incidents. So Jean, particularly in leading our operational services and all the pressures that we've got around strikes, whether that's our strikes or partner strikes, is clearly there. So I think it'd be good to sort of just bring Jean in shortly, just to sort of say a little bit about how those pressures are still being managed through the teams. So I wanted to just focus on that one. So I'll probably just lean to Jean now, just to sort of recognise what's happening and to give some assurances about what is still happening in services, please.
Thank you, Angela. So I'm very pleased to say in the afternoon call today, both acutes have stepped off critical incident. KGH still remains on Able 4, which is the highest level in terms of operational pressure. NGH are on Able 3, so it has stabilised, and that is absolutely, as Angela said, through a huge amount of system work across the whole of the ICB with our social care partners. Within NHFT, we still remain under significant pressure, particularly around mental health referrals. Our primary care partners are stating that that is where their big areas of pressure remain within mental health, but also within our community teams, particularly our physical health teams. We've seen unprecedented levels of referrals into ICT and district nursing over the past 2 days, and I'm talking about nearly 100% increase. So it has been very difficult to manage, but the teams are absolutely remarkable and will continue, I'm sure, to make sure they do everything to provide the safest care we can for our patients.
No, thanks, Jane, and once again, thanks to everybody in that, and we'll keep people updated as we keep progressing through this particular period. Now, in addition to that, there's obviously a very big focus on workforce. We've mentioned that before, and that continues to be a key focus area. So that is in relation to recruitment, retention, health and well-being, and that is something that I think you wouldn't be surprised for me to keep mentioning here at this meeting, because it represents probably the most challenging area for us all to work on through this year and also into the next. So that continues to be one that I think I'm constantly thinking about, the team is constantly thinking about, and I think it's fair to say that through the critical incident we very much had that at the centre of what can we do differently to support those teams in critical areas, and we did do some things differently, and we'll take some learning to see if there's any of that we can do going forward too. Then the third area that I wanted to mention is the operational planning guidance for the NHS and the ICS. And I think we received that about Christmas Eve. So that has come out. That gives us a very clear expectation. So a real focus on operational planning this next year and beyond, and an expectation for the ICS to deliver and give a direction of travel for the next 5 years as in a forward plan. Now, obviously, this is a really important mechanism for the organisation because it gives us clarity about investment, resources, the workforce, and what we need to transform and deliver. But at the same time, we have to work very much with our system partners, because clearly this is a plan that is delivered across the system. So this is something that Dave Mayer, the Deputy CEO Managing Director, will be leading on, supported by all of the executive colleagues and other colleagues in the organisation. I'm just going to ask Dave just to say briefly a little bit about the approach we're taking with the system, but also what we're doing internally to make sure we can triangulate the information and then report through board as you'd expect. Thank you.
Thanks, Angela. So colleagues, Happy New Year. As Angela said, we've got a two-pronged planning approach this year. One is a 2-year operational plan, which brings together the money, the people and the finances. The other being a 5-year long-term plan for the system, which is predominantly population health driven and would be the partnership plan for the system. We have an exec group meeting weekly now starting next week to begin to review and triangulate all the different parts of the planning that are coming through from our operational and corporate colleagues. That group will meet on a Friday every week, and over the period of the next 4 to 5 weeks we will finesse some content which reflects the ask from the national team in terms of the expectations for 23-24, but also help us get into thinking about DIGBQ, our underlying and overarching strategy, and our delivery plan for that over the next year, having just come out of year 1 of some of the delivery on that. So we'd be aiming to bring something back to board in February, and then obviously can keep governors updated when we get into March. The expectation is that we would submit something by March in draft and then a final version in June. So those are the kind of timescales we're running to.
Thanks, Dave. Yeah, thanks, Dave. And I think it's fair to say that we can expect and anticipate 23-24 to be a challenging year. So I think that's important. But as with all challenges, there's opportunities. So it's really important that we take those and understand what they are. And in order to, if you like, respond to some of the challenges that we have, be it finance or workforce, one of the ways in which we are taking it forward is to look at value across the organisation. I'm just going to ask Richard Wheeler just to say a little bit in terms of the approach we're taking around value and how we're going to construct that and make sure that we understand how that fits into the planning guidance going forward. Thanks, Richard.
Yeah, thanks, Angela. So we've already had discussion internally through the exec team and are taking items through various kind of trying to fit things into existing governance forums, such as our workforce transformation committees and the like. And we've got a series of programs, as Angela said, that link very much to how we value and support getting the right resource and the right staffing arrangements in place. And we're going through a process of engaging with people so we can see, what is the reality of the opportunity against probably just under 20 different themes that we're pursuing for 23-24. Alongside that, we've had discussions across the group with Leicester Partnership, so we're sharing ideas through that route, and obviously we will have discussions as well through the ICB with all of the parties there, so that we can bring that together. And although we are in some pretty challenging financial times at the moment, we're still very much taking the ethos of how do we support quality improvement, because we know quality improvement yields financial benefit for us. So it's very much being driven, as Angela said, from that value and supporting people address some of the challenges that they've got, and then with the expectation that financial position will improve as a result of that. Thank you.
Thank you, Richard. And I think the other things I would just mention is in relation to our collaboratives, which are clearly very much about integrated care, but also about strategic ambition to work on population health. And of course, locally, we have a lot of work around our mental health, and there's been an autism collaborative. And I was really pleased at the last quality review with the system that Dale Bywater, the regional director, described the community and mental health transformation of Northamptonshire as exemplary, which I think is really important to share with you. And also, I think important to share that because we've had a lot of experience now of different collaboratives, we are doing an expression of interest to be an innovator around the collaboratives as part of our group work, because we've shared and cross-fertilised across Northamptonshire and Leicestershire. So we have put a bid in to express interest to become an innovator in a regional sense, and we're waiting for the outcome of that. And meanwhile, we've clearly been doing a lot of work in a collaborative, the East Midlands Alliance with St Andrews Healthcare. And I hope people have seen that through the work that Julie's been leading as an improvement director, there has been improvement in their ratings. And again, the regional director recognised this as nationally pioneering work. So I think, again, an example of partnership working, integrated care, making the difference, and us being recognised for the leadership that we're taking to improve those outcomes for people. Thanks, Krishni.
Thank you very much, Angela. So just to, an update to really just highlight the things that are happening, issues and developments around both our system and regionally, as Angela has described, and indeed nationally with things like the strike action and more generally pressures around the NHS. Is there anything that anyone would like to just raise before we move on, David?
Yeah, just to thank Angela and the team for that report. It's really encouraging to see team members working together. So thank you, Angela, for setting that up in that way, and to colleagues for taking the time to come. But in a public meeting, that demonstrates the seriousness of the team and indeed of the Board of Governors to receive this. My personal view is, and this is a political statement, that we are let down by the failure of national politicians to discuss the realities of health funding. And in that context, I think we offer support to our management team in coping with what's a really serious challenge across the whole of the system in health and social care. But it's really encouraging to have that, and full support from me for seeking those developmental opportunities. You have to use every opportunity, and the fact we have the capacity to do it speaks a lot about the effectiveness of the team. So thank you very much.
Thank you very much, David. Chris, and then Richard Amponza, please.
Yeah, thank you again for the update, Angela, and I think David just got in before me with the hand going up. I did want to add, on behalf of the council, thank you for all that you, the management team, and for every member of staff is doing in every corner of the trust, and particularly to have the update from Jean around the system working. I think the NHS, we all know, is a demanding, unforgiving environment. It's relentless. It's stimulating and challenging, but you add on that layer of industrial unrest and staff, which feels like a collective cry from the heart in terms of enough is enough. I think we can all see that and feel that in our roles as governors, and when we talking to families and relatives and the people we represent. So thank you again for all that everyone is doing. I just want a small point, and perhaps for David. I mean, one of our functions is to express views on the trust's strategic plans, and that's not to this. It's not about red penning, but it's nuanced now, because as governors under the new code of governance, we also represent the interests of the ICS. So I think at some point it would be helpful, I think you've done this before, David, very ably, to give us an update on the 5-year long-term plan, particularly around population health. Because when you think only 20% of what makes us healthy comes from healthcare, there's so much we could do, as we talked earlier in the meeting, around the community wellbeing forums, local area partnerships, that as governors we could shape and influence. And to be able to see at a high level what the trust is planning with the system just enables us to join up the dots, as well as fulfilling one of our responsibilities. I know you know this, but it was just, I was thinking aloud. Thank you.
Thank you, Chris. Richard, I think we can certainly, I think you probably already planned, have you not? I seem to remember on the forward plan, there's going to be an opportunity for some contribution from governors to the development of those plans. Do you want to confirm that, as Chris has raised that?
Absolutely, Krishni. I think you read my mind. I was just going to confirm we are indeed planning such a discussion, Chris, at the March meeting, so we can look forward to that in a couple of months' time. Thank you.
Great. Thank you, Richard. So Richard Amponza, please.
Thank you, Krishni.
Yeah.
I just wanted to make a quick comment about Angela's comments on the critical incident, and some of those of us who work within the senior management team led by Julie Shepherd had opportunity to support some of our staff within the community hospitals, and just to see the enthusiasm, not just of clinical staff, but actually people of corporate services, not necessarily having any clinical background, but just willing to market and to help serve drinks, do whatever. It was just amazing to see. And yesterday I was talking to the senior matron of Hazelwood, who said, Richard, it's been so good, we've had to actually decline offers of help, politely tell people, you know what, we're good, but thanks for your help. So, and I just think it speaks volumes of the direction of travel and the commitment of the leadership of the trust. So I just wanted to make that comment. Thank you.
Thanks, Richard.
Thank you so much, Richard, and that's a great insight, and you know, it's great to hear how people have stepped up and always step up, but you know, it's nice to hear it from you, I think, Richard. Joanne, finally.
Yeah, just a bit of an observation to feedback. Just again, you know, journeying with different patients who are moving between, you know, hospital to GP, and when they go to the GP hasn't got the expertise and the diagnostic tools to check them out further. So then they're having to be sent to A&E. And again, it's just an observation about, for that particular patient, then fortunately that patient was on System 1, so you could see what conversations had taken place and what documentation was in System 1 regarding the GP. But then when they go into A&E, then, you know, you can't get that information. And again, it's about this, you know, this whole system approach and how the communication, it is where it is at the moment. But surely going forward, Angela, as you've discussed, you know, it does really feel the pressure. What the numbers that you're saying, you know, you can feel that, and so, you know, it has to be all joined up together, doesn't it? So let's hope Rishi is having those conversations round that table. It was great to see those conversations taking place on Saturday. I know that the lead for A&E was around that table, and he was really pleased to be there. So let's hope that conversations really do take place and things move forward. Thank you.
Thank you, Joanne.
Thanks, Joanne.
Angela, do you want to comment on?
Yeah,
I mean, I think there are plans within the
Yes.
ICB, aren't there, to improve that connectivity, and I think they call it interoperability, don't they?
Yes,
Is that the technical term?
Yes, I think, I mean, Joanne's right. You know, we haven't got the system or the integrated care that we want yet. There are pockets of it, and that is great, but there is more to do. And I think that's important to say. And at the moment, the sort of demand is very, very high and increasing. So we've got to be able to deal in the here and now with the demand, and that is helped if we've got systems obviously connecting together. But there's also a real need in the system to think about how do we get to more of a needs-based approach rather than just demand-based approach. And I think that's something that is part of the 5-year planning piece, but you're absolutely right. People being able to communicate and systems. I mean, I'm really pleased. I mean, in this county, System 1 is used by many of our primary care and secondary care colleagues, which does help. But there's more to do, Joanne, and you're absolutely right. So this is the start of integrated care, and we've got great examples, but lots more to do.
Yeah, brilliant. Thank you very much, Angela and team. And I think just to express really on behalf of the council, and perhaps we can report it to our board meeting later in the month, the council's thanks to all the staff who continue to exceed expectations and step up to you know, deal with these challenging situations in the way that Richard and others have described. So I'm sure we can record that and make sure it's also recorded within our board meeting later in the month. So thank you very much. I'd like us just to move on then to the final topic in our public meeting, final main topic, and this is a risk and assurance topic relating to an ask from the National Director for Mental Health to undertake a quality and safety review of mental health, learning disability and autism inpatient units. And I'm delighted that Julia, as our quality non-executive lead for quality, is going to lead this item, but I believe we also have James Mullins present. I hope, anyway. I can't see James on screen, but hand over to you, Julia.
Thanks, Krishni, and hello everybody. And if anybody hasn't met me, I chair our Quality and Safety Committee, one of the subcommittees of the board. I'm just going to talk you through a really important piece of assurance around this review, which went through the Quality and Safety Committee in December. And I'll bring you some highlights and talk about the level of assurance that we've taken from quite an extensive review, which I think you'll see in a moment. So James will join us for any questions, any comments at the end, but I'll just whisk you through very quickly just what the review consisted of, so you can understand the level and depth of assurance that we've been able to take from this. So thank you, Richard, for the slides. If you can move on to the first one. As Krishni said, a bit of background. At the end of September, all providers of mental health and learning disability services in England have been mandated to undertake a review of quality and safety of those services. Really important. This was following a BBC programme, which some of you may well have seen, which had some undercover filming of some really appalling behaviour. It was staff towards patients and staff towards each other, and it was truly shocking. So I think right to ask us all as providers to very vulnerable groups of people what assurance we have that we're not developing what's called a closed culture. And that's really about where poor behaviour becomes the norm and there's lack of dignity and respect. People are afraid to speak out, both patients and staff, and the area the service becomes unwilling to have new people come in and join them to ask for feedback, etc. And the reason this is really important is because that increases the risk of harm to the vulnerable people that are being looked after. So James Mullins, as Group Director of Patient Safety for Leicestershire Partnership Trust and ourselves, led the review of these 4 areas within NHFT, and he used a whole mixture of different areas of evidence and assurance to gain assurance about whether we believe that we have any of these closed cultures developing within our services. So just to add in that actually the Care Quality Commission very helpfully came out a little bit earlier this year with some really good guidance about what closed cultures look like and how to identify and respond to them. And I know James has used some of this in the work to look at our own services in detail. So if I let you put the next slide on, Richard, that'd be great. So the next 2 slides, I'm not going to go through these boxes in detail. You won't be able to see them particularly well, I don't think, but we will make sure you can see the slides afterwards. And actually they are on our website, on a public website under the quality section. Having been through the Quality Committee in December, we felt it was really important to share with the public where we gain assurance around what the cultures within our services are. So it's a huge range of different pieces of information, some of them complaints data, for example, data on seclusion, segregation, freedom to speak up information from different services, patient safety data, various audits that we've undertaken, data on deprivation of liberty, assessments, etc. And all of this was data for a whole year. So from October last year to September this year. If you just pop the next slide up, Richard, that'd be great. It's just the second part. Information from safeguarding referrals, for example. I mean, I'd say that there's a vast amount on here, and certainly each part of those we could spend an hour talking about the detail behind it. But basically what it shows us is that we already have systems and processes to look at a huge amount of the indicators that would point towards telling us that our staff, our patients don't feel they can speak up and these closed cultures are developing. But we've taken the opportunity, James took the opportunity to look much wider at many different aspects. So that's the 2 slides. If you just pop the next slide on. More importantly, the findings and recommendations. Okay, I'm not going to go through all of these, but it's really important to say that when James reviewed all of this, the information he looked at doesn't suggest closed cultures currently exist, but that could be quite a complacent statement. And certainly at the Quality Committee, we were able to sort of highlight and make sure that everybody understood that this isn't a one-off. It's certainly a snapshot review of the last year. But actually, any individual can exhibit really poor behaviours at any point. What we need are the processes, the systems, the culture for people to be able to speak up when a rogue individual behaves very poorly. And that's what the assurance is about, that everything that's been looked at, all of those different boxes, evidence from a huge array of conversations, visits, reports, audits, etc., all lead to concluding at the moment that the closed cultures are not evident within the services that were looked at. Some of the really important recommendations going forward, some of them are really good. They're highlighting great things that we have in place, and others where we can strengthen some of our systems. Really good part is the first bullet point, our early warning triangulation meeting, which brings together trends, highlights, early warnings from a number of different areas. That meets very regularly and involves people from lots of different teams across the trust. So really, really important to acknowledge that's in place. One of the really important things for me, one of the fourth bullet on there, talks about we have systems to get feedback from students, apprentices and trainees, but that's not formally hooked into our early warning sort of trigger systems, but they're going to look at that. That's really important because those groups of people are really external observers of what it's like to work around here. What is it like? What's it like to be part of this service? And students, for example, work alongside our staff. They're not visiting, we can visit, managers go and visit, all of us can dip in and visit a service, but actually to work alongside the staff as an external person, trainees, apprentices, etc., they're absolutely vital for us. They're eyes and ears that we need to take notice of. So formalising their feedback into these processes is really important for us. There's a number of other recommendations, certainly particularly, for example, on social care. They looked very deeply at the referrals that have been made to social care, but actually it's more about areas that haven't been completed. So which areas never make a safeguarding referral? Is that right? You know, you'd expect that some areas might do, and if they don't, what's going on there? So looked at it from both sides, which was great. So all in all, it's not a one-off exercise. This needs to be built into business as usual. And certainly the progress of the actions which we saw at Quality and Safety Committee, the action plan will be reviewed. If we could just have the last slide, it's just another couple of last steps. A system-wide workshop is planned for the medical directors and chief nursing officers. What does good look like? And looking at it from a system point of view. And we will monitor quality and safety, the ongoing progress with the actions, etc. So all in all, I think we took very, very strong, substantial assurance that the many different aspects of patient experience and care were looked at within these units, and where humanly possible, with a fine-tooth comb, James crawled through many parts of evidence, bits of evidence that point us to saying that at the moment the cultures are in a good place. People do feel they can speak up, and we are alerted if things begin to go wrong. So we took that as strong assurance. I'll stop there. I've got James in the background if anybody wants any detailed information. And as I say, this and the paper that went with it are on the website for the public to see the detail of what we've gone through. So thank you very much for that.
Thank you very much, Julia. So I think I can see a comment or question from Joanne, please.
Julia, just making the point and turning it around the other way. When you say about apprentices, junior staff, yeah, if a lower grade staff isn't supported by a more experienced staff, or there's poor performance of it can reflect the performance of a higher banding of staff if a junior staff isn't being developed. And do you see the point I'm making?
Yes, shall I come back to that, Krishni? Is that okay?
Yes, please do.
Yeah, absolutely. You're right, Joanne. The support, staff support in teams, supervision opportunities, opportunities to have discussions and be able to grow and develop, absolutely vital. And they're the softer sort of things that aren't always openly available, are they? But we certainly look at supervision, at high level, in dashboards, etc. But I think having the support, waffling now, get my words straight, apologies folks. I think the support wrapped round individual people within any team, whether that's supervision, appraisals, ongoing opportunities in team meetings for discussions, that's all highlighted in CQC's framework for looking at elements that demonstrate a very open, honest culture. And that's one that will develop staff. And you're right, they will go on to develop and grow. And I know that some of the information James looked at through this review certainly took all that into account. So I think absolutely good point. Well raised, and I know there are some systems that are in place that do support people, especially the students and lower graded staff.
Thank you, Julia. Okay, just take a couple of comments then from Sam and Chris, and then maybe James. Just conscious that James is here, so I perhaps give him an opportunity to come in as well. But maybe take a couple of comments first, and then we can pick up between Julia and James any final comments. So Sam and then Chris Davison, please. Sam.
Yeah, thank you. Having listened very carefully to that, there doesn't seem to be much external scrutiny. Everything is done within. And for me, that's a concern. It's like you're marking your own homework.
Okay.
And relying on students and apprentices to blow the whistle, and they're the only kind of independent people in the mix.
Thank you, Sam.
Feel right.
So I think that was the ask was an internal review, but that doesn't mean there aren't other mechanisms for external review. So perhaps we can get James to comment on that. But can I just bring Chris in, and then we'll respond to that, Chris?
Yeah, no, Sam's point's well made, actually. It was, I know this was an internal review. I think we all, having seen the article about Greater Manchester Foundation Trust, the medium secure service at Edenfield, we all were very shocked. Anyone who has any care or sense of dignity would have struggled to watch that. And I know the review commissioned by Claire Murdoch did require an internal review. And NHFT always has an ambition to go better, further in terms of meeting standards and exceeding them. And I think in the round, Sam's point about external input is worth considering. And I think that wasn't my main question. And James, you're on the call. I was going to ask you this. In the context of this review, as Director of Patient Safety, cross patient safety experience, quality of care, was there one thing from this review you thought, you know what, we've got to be better at this? Sorry to put you on the spot, but in terms of the assurance we've received from Julia, which is really helpful through the Quality and Safety Committee in your role, having undertaken that, was there one thing you thought, yep, we really need to be better at this?
Thank you, Chris. So James, put you on the spot as you're here, and Julia might also want to comment, but can you comment on Sam's point as well? Because I think Chris is right. It's an important, external assurance is also important. This was a process that was a request that we undertake across all organisations, but there's more to be done. So James, do you want to comment, and then we can get anyone else who wants to come in? James?
Yeah, more than happy to. And they're both really good questions. Sam, I really appreciate the question, actually, because if there's one thing that we do in this organisation is we're certainly not afraid to hold the mirror up to ourselves. And that goes both ways in terms of other people telling us where we're getting it right and we're getting it wrong as well. As Krishni rightly said, the review was very much intended to be an internal focus, hence why we did it like that way. But as Julia also said, this isn't a one-off. This is about how we also make this business as usual rather than just be a one-off exercise. And part of that business as usual, and one of the things Julia mentioned earlier was the CQC guidance, and some of the things within there in terms of the sort of definition of a closed culture, if you like, is having that is an inability of external people to look into the service. Now, obviously, we have lots of external scrutiny already in terms of, you know, regulation, both from Ofsted, CQC, but also very much around local authority, safeguarding. So there's lots of ways that we already have that sort of external scrutiny. But yeah, it's a really good point, and one I think we will need to reflect upon to say how do we get even better at that. And so I'll absolutely take that on board. In terms of Chris's point, what was the one bit that I thought we could do better on? For me, it was about the feedback mechanisms. So we have lots of really good processes in place already for patients, for families, for staff to feedback. But the bit that stuck out for me was and it was a key action at the end of this, was around how we enable and gather feedback from people that may not be able to feedback as easily as others. So, for example, people within our learning disability services, people with dementia, people who maybe don't communicate in English as a first language. You know, the feedback on I Want Great Care, and also even things like complaints, is very heavily white British, and it's from a very adult, young people and adult group of people in terms of the demographic. So one of the key actions for our head of patient experience is to set up a quality improvement group to look at what did we do. We may already have some mechanisms in place, but actually what do we need to do to strengthen it further? So that was one of the key actions. And then I think the other one was the pulling this together wasn't a simple task. It went through dipping into several data streams, lots of different people, different departments. And one of the things we do want to do as an organisation with things like this is to improve the sort of data quality around it. So one of the key recommendations for myself and Julie Shepherd, our chief nurse, is to look at how we create a heat map that gives us that early warning triggers and scores in a much easier and simpler way that we can use, that gives us that real clear line of sight, gives us the ability to shine the light where we need to shine it in a really simple way, an effective way, but also gives even clearer board to ward assurance and data around that. So that's what I would suggest would be the areas, Chris.
Okay.
Thank you very much, James. And you know, I think I remember when we first discussed this at a board development session that there was this national ask, and I remember a really important point that stuck with me that Angela emphasised, and that the starting point always has to be to imagine that this could happen here. That, you know, never to think that it can't happen, never to be complacent about that. And I think that's a mindset, isn't it, about how you're always open and challenging yourselves. And I think Julia made that point really importantly, that this isn't a one-off exercise. And I think that speaks to the very important point that Sam made about you know, not taking it for granted, really. So I'm really conscious of the time. I've got a couple more hands have gone up, so I'll take those, and then perhaps Julia, is there anything you want to say at the end? If not, I'm happy to close things off, but I'll bring Melanie and David in, and then perhaps close it off unless Julia or perhaps Julie want to come in. So Melanie?
Yes, I was only going to say the other awareness that I've seen within the trust is an acute understanding that when you have workforce pressures, you have new people joining, you have maybe people leaving and people changing roles, you know, everyone's under a lot of pressure. That is very much the environment in which cultural change can happen. And I've taken a lot of assurance from seeing a great awareness of that. Particularly as I've interacted with both operational people within the trust, but also within the people within the HR function, for example. So I think that's an important awareness as well. Thank you.
Thank you, Melanie. And of course, Melanie is our Freedom to Speak Up lead within the non-executive director group, so liaises closely with the Freedom to Speak Up Guardian as well, which I think is a helpful additional assurance. David?
Yes. Thanks for all that work, and it is impressive that so much was pulled together so quickly, and that shows a good organisation. But the point about external scrutiny is important. And I just wanted to say quite emotionally that I've been saying for the last 2 years that if governors do not have access to services, we are not able to fully discharge our responsibility, at least our sense of emotional responsibility, that we have a duty to people who are in our systems to help them keep safe. And there is so much research internationally about the risks of the environments that we run. And that's why I keep raising the point, and I don't do it to be awkward, and I don't do it to be difficult. I do it to show respect to the organisation and our high values and our high sense of expectations, that as representatives of the community, we have a role in making sure that systems are open. And we can do that by hearing reports like this, but we also need to feel that we have closeness. Helen raised that question, and I think it is a risk, and it should be a risk, that governors do not have access to services at the moment, and except in very unusual circumstances. I think that should be on our risk register. That's not to criticise anybody, but it's that we are not discharging that part of the service, which I personally feel is really important to avoid these sorts of things happening. So thank you very much. I am very reassured. It's the discussion itself shows the openness, which is fantastic. But as a governor, I just wanted to make that point. Thank you.
So I think it's a debate, unfortunately, we haven't got time to get into, but I don't know whether, Richard, you want to comment, because I think there is some national guidance around this, but that doesn't preclude us, you know, thinking about other ways in which governors can contribute in this area. Richard?
I didn't want to delay things, Krishni, so I'm very happy to come back later.
Okay, thank you. Richard, do you want to make a brief comment and then not to leave it hanging?
Just very briefly, I think you raise a really good point, David, about connectivity with services and service users. That's certainly something that we want to pick up as part of our membership work. And again, with reference to the earlier comments about in-person work, that will help facilitate that. It is worth being really clear, though, in the national guidance for governors, that it's clear that actually it isn't the governor role to do sort of service visits akin to inspections, but of course having a connection with services is important. So I'd suggest let's discuss how we can facilitate that over the next year. But just wanted to be clear, there is a difference between an inspection and the connection, which I think we're on the same page with. Thank you.
Yeah, and I think on that note, that's one of the reasons why I would really encourage people to go along to these webinars, because those are interactions with services. I appreciate they are online, but it is an opportunity to interact with services. And I think that's really important because it is that sort of understanding that people can have. So, but there will be other things that we can explore, which for all sorts of reasons, I think we haven't got time to discuss now, but are definitely on our agenda. So can I take the opportunity to thank everybody for the really good contributions today. We've gone a little bit over our time, and we do need to move into our private council meeting for a couple of private discussions that we need to have. So can I just take the opportunity to say thank you, to flag up that the constitutional changes you very kindly supported today will be taken forward, obviously, to the board, as we've said, and will be reflected in the final constitution that is approved. And also just wanted to pass on a message to end on a light note from Fiona Barr, who thanked colleagues very much for her cards and gifts, which she received before she departed, and she just sent her warm wishes to everyone for your support and her thanks. So I'll bring the meeting to a close. Perhaps if I can just say to governors, we do have some private business that we really very importantly need your support for in the private council meeting, which is a separate link that you will have received. Can I, in the interest of time, can I suggest that we reconvene in that meeting at 5:25, as we had a break a little bit earlier, and then we can hopefully close that off fairly quickly. But it is a very important discussion we need to have in private. So I'd please ask governors to join that meeting and that separate link in a few minutes' time. Thank you, everybody, and thanks again for your contributions.
Thanks, Christian. Thanks.